Hello, my name is Reed Silverne, and the name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, and I'm proud of it. No one from my agency or any other of the agency of the federal government has reviewed the material that I'm about to talk about or seen the material that I'm about to talk about. And one of the reasons they haven't reviewed or approved of the material I'm about to talk about is even I don't know what I'm going to say. Today I would like to talk about a number of different subjects, and there's been a lot of news coming out the last couple days about various items. One of the situations is the terrible bombing in Saudi Arabia in Dhahran, which attacked a Saudi Air Force base that had an American housing compound in it. Apparently, two terrorists drove up in a fuel truck. Must have either had a compatriot or there was a car planted nearby. And it's not like people who were watching the situation didn't react. They did react. In fact, they confronted the people. They looked suspicious, and they approached the truck, Saudi authorities. The two men fled and got into the other car, and they called an alert, and there was some removal and evacuations going on when the alert was called, and the bomb went off. It was 4,800 pounds of explosives, an entire fuel truck full of fuel. We don't know whether the ammonium nitrate was in the fuel like a Oklahoma-style bomb or not, and it just blew a crater 20 feet deep and 80 feet wide. And the force of the blast destroyed an apartment building that had and killed 19 Americans and wounded many, many others. They felt the blast hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet away. And I'd like to honor the victims, most of whom were American military soldiers and airmen of various kinds. Captain Christopher J. Adams, Sergeant Millard D. Campbell, Technical Sergeant Patrick P. Greendale, Captain Leland T. Hahn, Master Sergeant Michael G. Heiser, Staff Sergeant Kevin J. Johnson, Master Sergeant Kendall Kitson, Airman First Class Brent E. Marthaler, Airman First Class Mongera, Technical Sergeant Tran V. Nguyen, and Airman First Class Justin R. Wood, and there were a number of unaccounted for. This was an early list that I'm reading from. And I'd like to honor all the people that were killed or wounded in the service of their country in this terrible terrorist blast and attack on the United States and on American personnel. And I think that anybody should feel bad that this had occurred. There's a lot of politics going on about who's to blame. Apparently there were some attempts to widen the perimeter around this base to 400 feet, and that was refused by the Saudi government. At least that's the story that's come out now. And a lot of Republicans are coming up there and saying the Secretary of Defense, Perry, should step down. He didn't do enough to protect the Americans in there. They knew that there were terrorist threats. In fact, the base itself was at a high alert, as are all of the American facilities over there in Saudi Arabia. I'd also like to honor the people that weren't hurt or killed, but have chosen to serve in faraway places and places that are so different and from the American heartland and so exotic. And not only the military personnel, and I really appreciate what they've been doing, but also civil servants. And there's lots and lots of civil servants in Saudi Arabia, and as well as other exotic places throughout the world, not only serving in the Defense Department, but the State Department, AIDs, Aid for International Development, the Information Agency, and scores and scores of other agencies that have been doing their duty and doing their best to promote the United States, to promote our interests and our foreign policy, and promote our system of government and our beliefs. and I think that's very important. So I really appreciate the people that are there and the people that have sacrificed and sacrificed again before the very, very sinister forces out there in the world that think nothing of taking American lives. And also there's a situation right here in the United States. Apparently the government picked up 12 members of a militia group in Arizona who were practicing bomb making. In fact, apparently there were bomb making materials on hand, and they had videotapes of federal buildings, IRS, ATF, and various other facilities throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. And they had apparently taken a very serious plan and attempt to promote a terrorist attack against federal facilities within the Phoenix area, and possibly many facilities. Now, we don't know all the details. All I know is what I've heard in the radio coming in, and I'll read about it in the paper tomorrow, and perhaps more will come out. But I'm very, very happy they caught these guys and they rounded them up before they were able to do some damage. Since Oklahoma City, there's been a number of attempted terrorist attacks. There's been a number of groups that have been arrested with bomb-making materials. There was a militia group in Georgia with 39 pipe bombs. Two guys actually planted a bomb at an IRS office in Reno, Nevada, and that bomb was big enough to kill everybody inside, about 60 people, but the fuse that had been set went out by itself. And fortunately, there wasn't a tragedy. And they caught the two guys, only one of whom they say was associated with a militia group. Well, I don't know what that says about the other guy. If he's bombing a government facility in association with a member of a militia group, sounds like the militia group is pretty much responsible for it. And there's been a lot of very strange and bizarre activities going on. And fortunately, we seem to have a very proactive government out there, and we've prevented most of these tragedies. Unfortunately, the Oklahoma City situation, that group was burrowed down so deep and was so obscure that nobody knew about Timothy McVeigh or Nichols, the Nichols brothers, and they were unable to get that particular group before they did their damage. And I think the American people learned that there is a threat against federal facilities and federal workers, and not only that, but a threat against the United States as a whole, because these attacks on the American government are really attacks on America, and I think that's pretty clear. And no matter what the propaganda coming out from these groups and their sympathizers are, it's hard to say for an Islamic group to go out there and destroy an American compound in Saudi Arabia and say that wasn't aimed against America. It's just as hard to say that destroying a government building in Oklahoma City is not a plot and a threat against America and an insult to the American system of representative republicanism and democracy. And I think it's pretty awful that these people are running around. They have a right to speak. They certainly do not have a right to act. And I'm really glad that the U.S. Attorney, and I'm not sure who rounded them up or who caught them, whether it was the FBI or the ATF or who, but those federal law enforcement people that were on the case and that successfully prevented a terrible tragedy. So I'm very, very pleased about that they prevented the tragedy, even though I'm not pleased at all and find it terrifying and terrible that this situation has occurred and that people feel that they want to do that and that people are encouraged to do that. And I think it's awful. And we should take a look at that. We should see what to do about it. And I think the number one thing to do about it would be to get the truth out about what's in the Constitution. What does the Constitution really say? What does the Constitution really say about militias? The only constitutional militia, the officers are appointed by the governors of the states. That's what the actual Constitution militia clause says. So I think anybody that runs around and says that there's an unorganized militia of the United States, and that's the constitutional militia, should be confronted and say, well, what does the actual wording of the Constitution say? And they should have to read that. And I think the schools should start teaching the Constitution and what is in the Constitution and what is it that all of our military people swear to defend and protect. What does it say? And we should teach that. I personally believe that we should teach that in the schools and that people should start to know about it. And a lot of these falsehoods, people that run around and say, oh, the government can't make me get a driver's license because I have a constitutional right to transportation. Sorry, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you have a constitutional right to drive a car without a license from the state. It's just not there. Read it, check it out, see what it really says. And I think there should be a lot more people explaining what's in the Constitution and putting that forward. There'd be a lot less of this propaganda running around, and there'd be a lot more respect for our system, because the Constitution is a wonderful document and really has protected us and kept us free and powerful people for all these years. I'd like to talk about another odd situation. I've talked a lot about federal workers and the pressures and tensions that are under the that are on the federal worker. And the basic point that I've been trying to make over and over and over again is that the federal worker is carrying out the laws that the Congress that you elected passed and that the president that you elected has signed. And if you don't like those laws, that's fine. Go elect a different Congress and go elect a different president. And I encourage you to go out there and vote and do that. But those laws that are on the books are going to be enforced by the federal worker. And what is the federal worker responding to? The federal worker is responding to these regulations and laws passed by the Congress and signed by the president. But human nature always rears its ugly head, and hierarchy rears its ugly head. And there was a very interesting and almost an amazing incident over there in Miami. And I have to give at least 50 federal workers, INS inspectors, a lot of credit for revealing this and putting a stop to it, unfortunately, after the fact. And what happened was a congressional delegation of 7 congressmen were going to go down to the Miami, Florida INS offices and facilities and do basically a review and junket through Miami. And one of the problems in this facility is there is a tremendously overcrowded INS jail where they round up these immigrants that are coming in that are caught without documentation and papers, and they're thrown into an INS jail. And the jail was designed, a detention center is what it's called, for 226 inmates. But at this point, it had 407 inmates. And conditions were so bad that 50 women had to sleep in cots. And families and children were in these terrible situation. And of course, some of the immigrants are actually criminals that come in. They have drugs and so on and so forth. And they're caught coming off the planes. So they're supposed to separate, the relatively innocent undocumented people or the people that are claiming asylum from oppression abroad from real criminals and criminals that are caught with contraband and who knows what else, guns and so on and so forth. But in this particular facility, they were mixing all together, and they really weren't following the rules and regulations that were there. And one of the reasons were understaffing and under budget and a situation where the political situation throughout the United States and partially engendered by Congress is very, very hard and tough on illegal aliens. And let's go get these people and stop this horrible invasion and keep them from getting into our country, and you catch them as well and as effectively as you can. And then on the other hand, we're a compassionate people, and we're against inhumane treatment, especially inhumane treatment of women and children, and people that have, if they do have legitimate asylum, at that point have broken no law. And that's a little bit different from catching outright criminals who committed outright criminal acts. So this mix of people are in this jail. So two regional supervisors pushed the local chief of this office, whose name is Valerie Blake, the Miami Deputy District Director, and she ordered a dozen inspectors to do double time and to make those lines really move. And on top of that, she took 45 immigrants, gave them box lunches, and shipped them off to county jail at government expense. Cost $13,500 or almost $14,000. Of course, they would get back these people afterward to put in those overcrowded conditions. And 58 were just let go. They were let go without screening. We don't know whether they were criminals or whether they had contraband or whether they were legitimate asylum seekers. They would just get out of here. You know, we're overcrowded. Go your way and show up if you and do what you're supposed to do, but if we don't really expect you to. So they were just let go. And one of the interesting things is these people who put this whole thing together, the managers and the supervisors and the headquarters people, they used the email to put their whole plot and position together, and then deleted all their email messages at the end. Well, anybody who remembers the Iran-Contra hearings and Ollie North should be very, very aware, as should all federal workers. And I definitely say to any federal worker, don't put anything that you think is bad on an email, because an email is never truly deleted. It's always in there in that computer system, and it can be brought back up by a good computer company. And that's just exactly what happened. They found an entire email electronic trail to the whole plot, where the top managers at the region were telling them to not to wash their dirty laundry in public, and that everything was to look good, and so on and so forth. They reviewed 4,000 email messages from backup tapes. And of course, to anybody out there who's on a network, be aware, there are backup tapes. And if there's space in that memory, even if they were able to erase the backup tape, that thing is not gone until it's been overwritten. And it might never be overwritten. So all that information is out there, no matter what. And the really great thing is that when this whole thing was said and done, and after these 7 congressmen went away thinking, boy, what a magnificently run office. And isn't it just wonderful that the office that has the most pressure and tension and highest traffic can be just so magnificently run. And the jail can be so immaculate and not overcrowded. What a great job these managers are doing. 50 INS officers, low-level people, all went together and wrote a letter to the congressman and said, you've been duped. And these managers have really pulled a fast one over on you. And there was an investigation, and the upshot of the whole situation is, I believe, the senior immigration, okay, let's see if I can find it here. The senior people at the region and the district deputy commander or deputy director and the people directly responsible were all transferred to non-supervisory functions. Now you might say, well, that's not much of a punishment. But in the government, that's destruction of your career if that happens. So if they were moved out of their to non-supervisory functions, with a letter in their file, that's enough to, they might as well just retire. They might as well just leave, because they're not going to get anywhere, and it's just downhill for them. The report was from the Inspector General of the Justice Department. The Justice Department is the cabinet department that's over the INS. INS is one of the agencies. They had the most serious criticism was for Ms. Blake. She was the deputy director, who was promoted later on that year from her post in Miami to be the head of the agency's office in St. Paul. And Bromwich urged her dismissal. And he says the single person most responsible for orchestrating this effort to present a false picture to the task force was Valerie Blake. But for Blake's actions, the events described herein would probably not have occurred. Sworn statements continued. In the process, she caused her subordinates to take deceitful actions about which they seemed to feel they had no choice, breeding cynicism and dishonesty within the IRS. So that just shows that you can put contradictory instructions and try to force contradictory messages on an agency, on an organization, on people. You're going to breed a sense of destruction of morale and a sense of hopelessness, and it just doesn't do anybody any good. It certainly doesn't get the mission accomplished when that happens. And the mission should be clear and have a definite reason for being. And I think that's the problem, especially with the immigration situation. You have a situation where there's tremendous feeling out there in the country and tremendous political pressure, and political pressure that's completely contradictory in every direction. That says that we've got to clean up this problem, and the people who have to clean up this problem are these Border Patrol people and the INS agents. They've got to do it all themselves with nothing and a very low budget. And then on top of that, they have to do it in a humane way, and they have to do it properly, and they have to do it with compassion. And these people are up against the wall. And obviously, with this group of congressmen coming in, human nature took its course, and some of these managers that were trying to put up a false front and trying to say all is well when it was very, very clear that all was not well. And the people at the bottom just couldn't put up with it, and apparently didn't. Now, I'm not saying that anybody should do anything out of control or go out of the chain of command. I have absolute belief that the chain of command is there for a reason, and it's the right thing to do. But then again, it's very, very unusual in the government, but it does happen when people are told to do what's wrong and not what's right. And that's apparently what happened in this situation. And I think it's wonderful that these people here at the bottom came out there and said, this is wrong. And this is a violation of the relationship between our agency and our mission and the political system, which is really the system of democracy. And I'm glad that something happened over here. And apparently a few heads rolled, and that's just the way things happen. So there's a lot been going on. I thought that was a very, very interesting article, and I don't think that's a very common situation, but it does happen. And I absolutely believe that the way that we're going to prevent this kind of thing is for Congress and the people to have a clear message and not a contradictory message about what is the aim of what this particular agency is trying to do. I think another group that's undergoing the same kind of pressures is the FAA. For years and years and years, the airline industry and the politicians that were influenced by the lobbyists of the airline industry were hammering on the FAA. There's too much regulation. We don't need all this regulation. What are these regulators doing in there? They're driving up costs. They're forcing the customer, who's the American people and flying public, to pay too much for their transportation because we're just running around all these piddly little rules. And they came up with a system, Inspect the Inspector, and reacted to some of these pressures that were coming down on them. They were being terribly criticized. Laws were passed which deregulated the airline industries and pushed aside the regulators more and more and more, especially on the issue of rates. And now there's been a crash. People are blaming the regulators instead of blaming the company that didn't have their customers' best interests in mind. And I think that's very interesting. My name is Reed Silverne, and the name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. And I'll see you next week.